Islam, Shalom, Hola, Aloha, Bonjour, Kosio, Assalamu Alaikum. This is your brother, Tarik Bey, Indigenous American Moor, coming to you live and in full effect. Thank you for joining me once again. Please hit that like, share, subscribe button, hit the thumbs up, hit the bell if you want to be notified. Maybe even leave a comment and interact with my content. I really do appreciate your viewership. All right, I want to continue part 3 of growing up as a so-called black male in America. Last I left off, I was speaking on my middle school years, going into my high school years, like a brush I had with policy enforcers due to like systematic racism. So I'm just going to continue pretty much from where I left off, just highlighting a few things. So after Jeb Stewart, which was 11th grade, I went to the 12th grade, and that was the school I graduated from, and that was also in Northern Virginia, and it was Mount Vernon High School. Shout out, to Mount Vernon, class of 08, yeah. So yeah, after that, that went pretty fast. Decent environment, fun experiences there. But after that, I took a visit to Texas. It was my first time taking a flight, and ended up going to Texas, and that was in 2008. Visited a college campus for a few weeks. Had some fun. I ended up coming back, but pardon me, on my trip back, I was somehow targeted for a random search from the TSA. So, they say it was random, but I was taking a one-way trip back from Texas back to Northern Virginia. So I was somehow, targeted randomly. Somehow it's a random search or a random check. But I just somehow got targeted. First time taking a flight, on my way back from my destination, and yeah, that was a little unsettling. I was just like, out of all the passengers, why me? Maybe they thought, since I'm a so-called young black male, and I'm taking a one-way trip back to Northern Virginia from Texas. Maybe they're thinking that's suspicious in some way, shape, or form, running or supplying some type of, I have no idea what they potentially could have thought, but I was targeted for some random extra screening, and yeah, it didn't seem so random to me, honestly, so I'm gonna contribute that to, systematic racism. I didn't have anything, of course. I wasn't doing anything illegal at all. I was just, traveling, a young man fresh out of high school, checking out college campus with a good friend. Shout out to her. But yeah, I ended up making it back, fortunately, during that flight. So it was like something a little unfortunate happened, but it actually worked out in the best. So on the flight back, I was actually supposed to go to BWI, and then I would have had to commute back south, so it would have been a little bit of a further trek, and I would have had to either catch a taxi or have family come and get me, which would have been, extra expense and more time. But I ended up missing that flight. I didn't hear them call my name for the flight at the terminal. Apparently I was sitting maybe like a little bit down from the terminal I was supposed to be in, so I ended up missing that one. But they end up being able to connect me to another flight, and that flight was actually taking me closer to my destination, Ronald Reagan National. So I was like, okay, cool. That actually worked out, for the best for me. Then I could easily just catch the metro, the train, the metro rail, you know, you know, back home, use public transportation or whatever. I don't have to bother any of my family, spend extra money on taxis or anything like that. So, yeah, and that was before, Uber and Lyft. So that was, mind you, 2008 when this happened. So, yeah, after that, that was a fun experience. So, my luggage was on the other flight, my original flight. So I had to wait, a couple days for my luggage to come, which was fine. My luggage was delivered back to my house. So yeah, I did get my luggage back and everything was fine with that. Good experience for my first flight. I actually, on the way there, we actually flew over one of the Great Lakes, and that was my first time actually seeing one of the Great Lakes, and I believe it was Lake Erie. Flying over that lake, that huge body of fresh water, it was very enlightening. I felt maybe a little something from the ancestors. I definitely felt maybe at peace. I was a little confused at one point. I was like, wow, are we over like an ocean or something like that? My first time flying. So I was almost glued to the window. It was a very, very fun experience for me. Exciting, definitely have to do that again and some more. But moving right along, I ended up doing some community college in like 2009 to 2010. Got some college credits. Went to the community college here in Nova, Northern Virginia Community College. So yeah, that was a decent experience. I didn't complete college. I ended up going into the job market, job force. Started working, started trying to make more money, to afford my lifestyle. And after the community college, I started working more. A few years went by. So from 2010, I would say, to about 2012, toward the middle of 2012, I was working. And I was working in the restaurant industry. So I ended up meeting this brother who was a young brother from the current kingdom of Morocco. So I met this Moor, and yeah, he was real cool. He was getting me hip to a lot of things, because back then I wasn't aware. I wasn't very, very self-aware of like who we are, who my people are. Like I was always a fun person, very open-minded, astute. So I knew more than the average, but there was a few questions he asked me, and he brought some things to my attention that I really didn't pay attention to, or that I didn't have an answer for. And that, I would say, that sparked something in me to be like, why don't I know this? Or why is this like that? I never really thought about it. But one thing he asked me, he was like, why do you, just using American slang, he was just like, why do you guys say like shit after so much? He was like, oh, it was like good, like shit, SHIT. So I'm just like, good shit, it was good shit, oh, I'm about to eat this shit or whatever. He's like, okay. He's like, that doesn't sound good, because like, oh, I'm about to eat this. Or it's like, even though, shit can pretty much be anything, just, it's a noun, it's pretty much just used as a noun. So, you can use it, this and that. And I was just like, why do we always say shit so much, just using slang and cursing? As a young man, I'm like, no, I'm gonna stop doing that, associating that word with something good. So I was like, all right. And that kind of was a little surprising. I was like, it's something to think about. He also asked me something that I didn't really have an answer for, but he was like, do I know who the angel of death is? And me, I'm thinking of like the Grim Reaper or something like that. And it's like, no, I mean like Gabriel or whatever. I'm just like, surprising. I didn't really think of it like that. I'm thinking of, death with a scythe and a hood and stuff like that. I'm just like, okay, different way of thinking about things. We also spoke about hashish over there. He was like, how is the best hashish made in the mountains? And it's like a spiritual way that some of the older people who harvest it and make it how they do it, how it's very, very spiritual. And as I got older, as an older man in my studies, I realized that the hashish is related to the assassins, which evolved into the assassins. So assassins, like hash assassins, and it evolved into assassins as like Assassin's Creed. So it's like the history of the Moors and just being tremendously unstoppable warriors. Very skilled warriors. I was just like, man, the Moors are pretty badass. Very, very respectful. So I connected that back to what we spoke about during that time. You know what I'm saying? Cool, brother. Shout out to you, brother Nasir. All right. Moving along. After that, I didn't really become self-aware or aware of my history or start studying the history of this knowledge until I would say 2014, when I first saw a movie called Hidden Colors. All right, so Hidden Colors by Tarik Bey, and they spoke about the Moors and the history of America that wasn't really told, and how I heard bits and pieces when I was younger about it. The cherry tree right here, the flag, the cherry tree, how George Washington cut it down. I cannot tell a lie. I cut down a cherry tree, stuff like that. I'm like, oh, so it connects to this. This is the flag he's talking about, and this was the cherry tree. It wasn't a real cherry tree. So I'm like, okay. So I'm learning this knowledge, and I'm connecting it to stuff I learned in the past. But yeah, after seeing Hidden Colors and learning more of the history on my own, diving in deeper into the parts I was more interested in, or trying to answer the questions that I had, I started learning more about law and operating out here. So I actually ended up making my first personal identification card in order to stop utilizing the state-issued driver's licenses, since we didn't need those to actually travel and use our natural right to travel. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start studying this, and I figured out that our country does not have a nationality card for the nationals. Each state has its own jurisdictions and bounds for state identification cards, and the closest thing to a nationality card that we have in America is a passport, and there's certain levels of passports. So I started diving deeper into that information and some of the logistics of the things that we use on a day-to-day basis, and how they're making finance off of it when we should have these things by right, really, and how there's expiration dates on certain things. And it's like, how can your identity expire? So it's like you have to renew licenses, or you have to renew plates and tags and stickers for inspections and different types of things. So taxes are levied and held against us, and all types of stuff. So I'm researching this knowledge after I saw Hidden Colors and started learning about the history that wasn't told to us, and started to connecting it to my family history on how we are indigenous to this land. So I started doing more research on that, and in 2015 is when, 2015 into 2016 is when I filed my first affidavit personally, for the record. So by that time, I felt I've been like studying history and science and law for like those 2 years pretty much. I was just absorbing all the information I could about it, because it was so fascinating, it was so new, it was so fresh. And it made so much sense when the way I was taught before, or how I thought it was before by the public school education system, how I thought it was before, how our history was. It didn't really make sense, and it wasn't really very, very fascinating. It was kind of like, I would say, like a really, really whitewashed story. And it just didn't feel right. So learning the real history and what wasn't told to us and the parts that were missing, and then connecting the stuff that was told to us to the stuff that wasn't told to us. So I'm like, okay, so this is how this fits in here. And they just missed this whole area here and just focused on this one little part here, and how they were leaving certain people out of paintings, and a whole lot of things. But learning my own family heritage and paternally and maternally. So like on my father's side, I learned some of the family names and started going back, and found out that on my mother's side and father's side that my family had farms. Like both sides of the family had farms at one point in time, and those farmlands were either lost, and when I mean lost, I mean like taken in some way, or stolen in some way, most likely due to like unfair taxations being levied against them, maybe even some kind of a debt that may have been owed. On my mother's father's side, when I learned about the land that he lost, it was because of some debt was allegedly owed or something like that. So, and to my knowledge, to this day, I've been told that the land that was taken is still vacant in some way, shape, or form. So I have to do more research on that personally and figure out if that land is still vacant after all these years, and it most likely was taken illegally, and they might not be able to transfer the title over. So it could be in limbo in some way, shape, or form. The state could have it and it's in limbo in some shape or form, and it could just be up for us to reclaim it. So and that's in Halifax, Virginia. So and I found out the farmland on my father's side, which goes back to my grandmother Mary Medlock, that was in Alabama, Cherokee County. So that was very, very interesting. I'm like, okay, so I know that my family goes back to Anahuia, Cherokee, Eastern Band. So I'm like, all right. And my father's mother's mother grew up on a farm in Cherokee County, and looking at those census enumeration documents was very, very enlightening. I saw a family name, as in my name, Zachary. Whoever signed as head of household on that document's name was Zachary. I saw my great grandmother's name, Mary Medlock, there, and how they were marked as some members of the family were marked as white on the census, and I know she was a very, very high yellow person, a so-called red bone, red skin, as far as I know. So that was really enlightening and interesting, looking at that paperwork that said, Cherokee County, and it was missing some of the like provinces and charters and stuff like that. It was just left blank. So I believe that land was, it could have been under a land patent, because it wasn't under the municipality of that state. It was just like on its own. So our family, I guess, technically might have owned that outright through some type of land patent, which means the federal government or anybody couldn't have taken it from them. And I have no idea how we could have lost that, or somehow maybe it went abandoned. I'm not sure. I have to do more research on my own family on exactly what happened back then. But that was very enlightening. So on my father's side, I know it's the Lovelaces, the Johnsons, the Medlocks. All right, so those are just some of the family surnames that I know that are on my father's side. And on my mother's side, I know it's the Duncans, it's the Dunkleys, it's the Canadas, and it's also the Sidners. So yeah, just going back, I know my mother's mother's mother called her Ma Sidner. They called her Ma Sidner. And Sidner was a family name, but the story goes that she was a very, very tall, red lady, long hair, high cheekbones and everything. So it was known that she was a so-called Indian woman, right? You know, she was an indigenous woman. But the story goes that she was blind in one eye and that she was shot 9 times. And I guess through like various fights or attacks and scuffles and things of that nature, was known to have a shotgun. But she was shot 9 times and lived. So I'm like, whoa, like that was very surprising and interesting to learn. And I'm like, I remember hearing the old stories, and even in some of the older cartoons, like the Looney Tunes ones with like Bugs, Daffy, and them. I remember they would sometimes do like the Indian guy, Indian Joe, I believe. And on other stories, there was always a tale about how the American braves, like how the Indians in America were very, very hard to kill, notoriously hard to kill. So they had to shoot them a lot of times. Like this is like how the West was won type days, like when the Winchester was being used and stuff, right? So of course, a lot of the same tactics were used on the East Coast, and then herding and moving and forcing our people over through the middle of the country to the western part of the country, you know, through the Trail of Tears and stuff like that, and Indian Removal Acts, you know. So our people, so-called Indians, have been notoriously hard to kill, the warrior class, and allegedly the so-called cowboys and Indians when they would fight type of stuff. But you know, we were the cowboys. They actually called those guys cattlemen. So yeah, they say Indians were notoriously hard to kill, so they had to shoot them a lot of times. And it kind of draws my attention to how in modern day police shootings, the policy enforcers, when they attack us and brutalize us, and commit terrible human rights and genocidal acts against us, I always wonder, why do they shoot so many times? Why do they shoot our people so many times? And then I'm thinking back and I'm connecting it in my mind. I'm like, so-called Indians were notoriously hard to kill by gunshots. And I'm like, our people are allegedly notoriously hard to kill by gunshots. We are the same people, you know. I'm making that connection in my mind, you know. And this is, you know, as I'm an older man, just taking bits of information that I learned from my childhood, and I'm connecting them to other pieces that I'm gaining in my studies. So I really love doing that. I love the way my mind makes those connections and holds on to a little bit of information until there's something else to connect it to instead of just discarding it. But I appreciate you being with me. That's all I wanted to go over at this time. I want to continue with my story and saying how it is growing up as a so-called black male here in America, um, and dealing with systematic racism, racial discrimination, and just my journey and my origins and learning where I came from, who my people are, which direction we should be going and moving to, and trying to help others by sharing my story, um, and becoming self-aware and coming into this knowledge, uh, for betterment to actually, so we can actually honor our ancestors, and honor our elders that are still here today. So once again, thank you. This is Tarik Bey, your brother. Wado. Peace.